Welcome to another edition of Talking with Kevin and Son. Again, I'm writing solo today. My co-host Ife had some issues that he had to take care of. So I'm sitting here with God, he is such a phenomenal author. I just want to take care of the business side of this. This episode is brought to you by the 10 United Podcast Network. And through the power of our stories, our mission is to uplift through our voices, inspire, share stories and experiences and perspectives using the framework of teaching, learning, and modeling. Our purpose is hope, helping other people every single day. As we've done week in and week out for the last year or two with Talking with Kevin and Son, we have brought you some fantastic people. Some have made you laugh, some have made you cry, some have made you think. Today, we have a young man that just happens to be a filmmaker. He just happens to be an author. He just happens to be a musician. He probably does magic too. So I'll leave that out.
I thought you was going to tell him. I didn't know.
Yeah. Martial arts expert. He's also a public school educator on the East Coast, and we'll talk about that. I want to introduce you to a very special man, and we're going to talk about two of his books. We're going to talk about Johnny Come Lately. We're going to talk about Sloppy Joes. I'm going to ask him a couple personal questions and how he identifies as an American author and his position as to where he comes from. And if you stay around long enough, we'll talk about his connection to hip hop music and the origin and what he's doing now with Street Pressure. And so I'd like to welcome my guest, Mr. D. Sundiata. Am I pronouncing that right? And please correct me.
Sundiata.
Sundiata.
Sundiata, the Tail Weaver.
The Tail Weaver. D, let me tell you, I love you, man. We have talked in the back channels. We have talked about things that probably will get me canceled. But we have talked about the truth. We have talked about music. You have introduced me to people in the hip hop community that I never thought I would meet, and I want to thank you. But the biggest gift is you have a series of children's books. And when I talk about social conscious writers, you are just that. And I want my audience, our audience, because now mine is yours, to get to know you as a person. And then let's segue to you as a writer. And we'll talk about one of my favorite stories that you wrote is Johnny Come Lately. And then hopefully you'll talk about Sloppy Joes too. So if you don't mind, I know I gave a little bio about you. Tell our listeners who is D.
All right. Well, I first of all want to give shout out to you for having me on the show. You know what I mean? I love the moniker "Reach One, Teach One." That's an old something that I follow and believe in and taught while I was teaching in school. So where am I from? I'm originally from Massachusetts. I was raised in a place called Cambridge, Mass. And my family relocated to Roxbury, which is maybe about 10, 15 minutes away from each other. But anyway, it's in the greater Boston area. I identify as, I live here in America. I was born here, and there are generations of my family to come here. So I identify as being Aboriginal or indigenous.
All right.
And I do that because indigenous, as I continue to study, had different types of meanings. One of them being any people who was here in this land pre-Columbian, before the Christopher Columbus and the European expansion, or anyone who was brought here from another land, who was forced and is seeking to re-embody themselves. So I see myself as indigenous. I also call myself a Moorish American.
Now you got to explain that to me. That's the first time I've heard that. What is that?
Well, one of the earliest names for our people was Moor. And some people say it's a European word, but some people say that it's older than that. There's a lot of history and discussion about it. The reason why I use it in connection to me is because it gives a connection to the land. It gives a connection to history. as opposed to being called black, uh, because that's a crayon in a crayon box, as far as I'm concerned, as opposed to being called BIPOC, because I used to know Tupac. I don't think we need to be BIPOC. Because black, indigenous, people of color. See, that bothers me because people of color does not give me a nationality or a real identity. It's something that you would call a character. And I invent caricatures and characters. So therefore, you know, I don't want to be that. I'm a real man.
Now, does this conversation roll over into your books? Because I want to talk about Johnny come lately, and this topic is it's a sensitive top topic, especially when we talk about how we identify ourselves, and we are probably as people that are melanated, we are probably the only people in this America that every single day has to struggle with their identity and being accepted for who they are. And that's another conversation we'll have when we have an audience of someone that's open-minded to understand what education is really about. Not designed to make you comfortable, but it's designed to make you think. Johnny Come Lately, you as an author, an American author. We're probably the only ones that have to say we're an American Black author in this country. But tell me the origin of Johnny Come Lately and what the story's about. It's a beautiful story. For those of you that have not read any of your literature, he has a whole series of them. It could be located on Amazon. And we'll ask him at the end of each conversation, each book, to let you know how to get the link. And some of them on audio, and some of them you just have to pick up a book and read. But let's talk about Johnny Come Lately. What was your motivation? And why'd you write this story?
All right. Johnny Come Lately, I wrote it because I was thinking about the spirit of selfishness. You know, it seems like the spirit of selfishness, although it seems like a simple concept, I think it's at the bottom of most of the problems on the planet. People not being able to see themselves in other people. And there has been powerful entities on the planet who have had the power to take things from others without them being able to take it back, which is a situation that we find ourselves in as a people. I don't get too much into politics when it comes to children's books. What I do is I try to leave seeds for knowledge, because I believe you cannot truly educate a child or an adult, or somewhere in between, if you don't have certain basic building blocks. You as a teacher, that's what we do. We build building blocks so that you can then, raise yourself. So as far as the book goes, I saw the spirit of selfishness, and it's a very hard thing to pinpoint where this power structure lies, where this spirit of selfishness comes from. Some people will personify it. Some people will put it in a spirit form. And some people just deal with it as a concept that's out there. So I put it into a form and a person that had no form, but you could still see that there was something there. Sort of like that elephant in the room that's invisible. So he was like an invisible elephant in the room that was claiming things from people. And pretty much people got tired of it. And they had to learn the number one thing in the world, which is unity. They had to learn to unite, to do something about it, to make things right. That's what the story is about.
And also, Johnny Come Lately is a beautiful illustrated book. I'm not for sure if you did illustrations and so forth. What is the age range of Johnny Come Lately?
Well, I wrote Johnny Come Lately. Well, let me say this first. Thank you for the comment about the illustration. That was done by a brother named Hosea Strong. Hosea Strong has worked with me on a couple of different projects, and we're going to continue to work. He's out of Chicago, and he's an excellent artist. And pretty much I had a good time making the book with him because he didn't really know the story. And I did that on purpose. I would tell him what I wanted him to draw in different pictures, and he would just use his own mind, create it, from what I described to him. And then we followed it all the way through. And so it was like it was an experiment. If I told him everything first, it might have turned out different. I wanted to get the best from him. So he's an excellent guy. I want everybody to check him out. That's Hosea Strong. But then what's the second part of that question?
Guy, you got me. The first part was the age. The second part was age range.
Right, the age range. So I wanted Johnny Come Lately to be something that a 3-year-old or 4-year-old could understand. The words in it, they may have to be older than 3 or 4, depending on how their parents are teaching them or their environment, how they're learning how to read. But it's something that a young child could read, and something that if a parent read to that child, no matter how young, as far as like 3 and up, I think they'd be able to comprehend on some level. The good thing, and I will say this for myself, in the book Johnny Come Lately, somebody who is 57 can learn something from Johnny Come Lately. There is history embedded in the book. There's politics embedded in the book. But you would have to be of a certain, you have to think on your own. And I leave it open to interpretation, which I think is what education is supposed to be about, not control, but teaching people how to think to come to the best conclusions for the greater society.
All right. There's a push in some parts of the world to destroy American literature because they
Yes.
don't want stories to be told. I struggle as an author when I hear young people say, I don't like to read. I hate reading. I struggle to listen to it as an adult. Well, I never like reading. And when I come back and I'm saying you've not found a book that you love to read, I said, once you find a book you love to read, you fall in love with reading. Also, because I'm an author also, books allow you to go on adventures that you can't get on Airbnb. You can't
Right.
get Delta and so forth. So when a young person tells you as an author, I don't like to read, what is your comeback to that young person? And you've been an educator. How do you get them to read?
Well, it's funny because I taught in the public school for 21 years, and I taught in like community centers and stuff before that, starting back in Roxbury, back in a long time ago. And I ran across that from year to year to year to year. It's a theme. You know what I mean? It's not like something, well, a couple of kids this year said that. No, you hear that all the time. I came up with something. I said, those who read, lead. If you understand that, you know what I mean? If you want to be a leader, you're going to have to read. The other thing I would tell them, because I worked in so-called Black, so-called African-American communities, I would tell them that certain people have a saying that they say in their own homes. They say, if you want to hide something from an N-word, put it in the book, because N-words don't read. And when I tell them, you know what I mean?
I'm going to
Like
tell
that.
you that's a general education amongst our elders. They said if you want to keep a secret from a black man, put it in a book.
Right.
And
And so, I agree that there's a lot in books, and like you said, there's a whole world in books. I mean, you can expand your mind, you can use your imagination, and in imagination, the word "mag" is in the word. Mag is the root for magic. There's magic in reading. There's magic in opening up your own imaginative process. You can find powers within yourself just by reading. So that's the things that I would try to express to the children or anybody who thinks that reading is, they don't like to do it. I can understand how it could be intimidating to somebody if they don't have the proper um, education of how to read. And here's something else, Kev. I've been reading since I was 4. My mother made me learn to read very early. What I found out was that in this land, you can know how to place words together, how to sound words out, how to read sentences where it's and make those sounds. Many of us still don't know how to read. That means involving etymology, history in the words that you use, because word sound power is a very serious concept. Understanding the roots of words put energy in those words. So the words that we use, if we don't understand the etymology of them, a lot of times we're putting curses on ourselves by using words. So it's like I found out as an adult, I still didn't know how to read till I got into etymology, and then started to study deeper meanings of words, where they came from. That's why I stopped using the word black, because I found out that the word black, as first of all, it's an adjective. So that's one. Second of all, the word came from Old High German, and it's not an old word. The original etymology of it was blek or blank, which means blank without color.
Hmm.
So the connotation has been flipped around with the denotation. So I said, okay, that's not for me. But just reading is something that we really need to get into, and like yesterday. And there was a reason why, for a long time, they kept us from reading during the time when we were being dominated. And that's another thing I would tell the children. Why would somebody tell you or keep you from learning how to read? What's the danger in reading? There got to be something to it if they don't want you to do it.
And that's where the statement comes in. Words are powerful. They either will build something or they're set up to destroy something.
Mm.
And that's the reason why, for both of us being authors of color, I know there's a stereotype as soon as they find out you're a Black author, is that this literature is not for my children or my people.
Right.
And when you talk about the etymology of words, is that everyone has a story to tell, and you are a master storyteller, and that's a direct reflection of your history as a filmmaker, and producer, your history as a songwriter and producer. I mean, you're connected with the hip hop world, and your history in creating histories and developing young minds. How do you overcome, as an educator, the conversation of what should be taught and what your responsibility for being taught? Because there's two educations. There's the education that our government has set up for us. And I just want to let people know, when I say our government has set up for us, going to public schools, there's a different education that you get in private schools. So if anyone is offended by what I just said, you can believe the lie, but I'm telling you the truth. There is a difference. Okay. How do you teach that education when there's a system that's making you responsible for teaching an education that actually doesn't give you the full education as a teacher? How do you go over that?
Well, now that question right there is one I'm still working on. I mean, I fought in the trenches for many, many years trying to teach things. And without getting into the details, but I ended up leaving because of something that I taught that a parent had a problem with. You know what I mean? And when I say something that I taught, it was something that dealt with our history, and it came right up on the plate, just like what's going on here. So many things have been hidden from us. We've been miseducated, misguided, and like you said, there's a systematic approach to teaching us, which pretty much turns us into minions and drones as opposed to thinking human people. Now, I'm only saying that as a over 2 decade teacher, in the public school. I do feel like the public school serves a great purpose for helping the children get along and eating and things like that, and giving them a place to be during the daytime. You can learn because they do have computers and books, but the programming, I think, they don't teach a lot about us, right? We learn American history, we learn about how the world is, but they don't teach a whole lot about our situation. They gloss over a lot of things that would help us to grow. We don't deal enough with economics in our schools. You know what I mean? Mathematics and reading are at the top of the list as far as things that we have to bring up. Naturally, when you have so long of being behind, there's a lot of cultural things in our communities that are affecting us. So, and I mean, it's a deep question. I don't want to talk about it too long.
All
But to
right, that's
answer your
fine.
question, yeah, to answer your question, I would just try to find innovative ways to touch them through their culture. That's one of the reasons for the books. That's why I added music to the books, because I know that a lot of children learn when there's rhythm. They learn when they can, when there's some kind of rhyming pattern, or when there's rhythm to it. So I never figured that question. I never really conquered it. I would drop seeds and do what I had to do and really put my neck on the line because a lot of things I was teaching them I knew wouldn't have been accepted from from their standpoint.
From the
But I'm not going
institution.
to tell you that you're not the original people on the planet if it's the truth.
Right. So you brought up something. I had this conversation with a couple of people. Um, Saturday mornings in my neighborhood, we used to be conjunction junction or whatever, the music or whatever.
Yeah.
And it helped me because I have a learning disorder.
Mm.
Helped me memorize through rhythm and so forth. And you put music to your stories along with the audible version of it, and you've connected with some great people. Now I know that Sloppy Joe's has a lot of music and everything coming to it. How did you? What was your vision in placing the music, the literature to it? How did that all come together? What motivated you? Because the one question everyone always asks when they find out that I'm an author, I've always wanted to write a book. How do you write a book? So the first thing I'm going to ask you before you go into the music and how you attached it and what motivated you is ask that universal question as I'm going to ask you, how do you write a book?
All right. Well, the first place to start with writing a book, I would think, got to have an idea, of course. When you have your idea, I think the best thing to do is to go within and write down or record into something your thoughts about that book. Make an outline. My process isn't the same for how I would teach someone else. My process is different because I've been doing it a long, long time. So I skip certain steps. But for somebody just first starting, I will tell them to jot their thoughts down in whatever way that they can organize them. Then, when they go to actually write the book, whether they're going to recite it, because some people will. Some of the stories I tell, I would take a recorder, tell the story from my mind, then go back and script it out
All right.
because some of the stories come better from me. Some of them I would write out first, like the Roach and Clothes is the story I wrote. I wrote that out all together, then I recorded it. And then, and then after that, we went to different process. So everyone's process can be different. I would suggest to any author to know that first. Know that there is no one way to write a book. There's a way that and a process to get it finished and put out in a certain way. So let's say if their final question was, how do you put one out? There are different ways to do that. You can go through an publishing company. You can find an independent publishing company. My first book I went through Author House Publishing. We made a deal with them, and they produced the book and provided a website and helped with the promotion and things like that. The next 3 books I wrote, I put them out through KDP Publishing. And that's the one that I would tell for anybody out there who wants to write a book, does not have the funding to come up with, the money that it takes to ship, produce, manufacture the books. KDP Publishing has a deal, they're through Amazon, where you do the book and you split up the profit on the back end.
Yeah,
So,
KDP Publishing stands for Kindle Direct Publishing. So if you go to www.kdp.com, they will walk you through the steps. I too have used that, and I've gone through traditional publishing and had the woes from there. I've gone through partnerships with independent publishing and gone through there. And I've also, because of frustrations of going through the process and being educated through the School of Hard Knocks and publishing world, I created my own label to do that. So I still use Kindle. So Sloppy Joe's and music. Let's talk about that. And then I
all right,
want
Sloppy Joe. The name of the book is Sloppy Joe, aka Sloppicus. And I'll tell quick. I came up with that. Big shout out to my friend Jeff Ware from Connecticut. We used to talk about some neighborhood names that people would have for each other. You know what I mean? Because if you come from the hood, a lot of times people talk, when they're talking smack or whatever, somebody will make up a name for you based off, a characteristic, maybe something that you do or something like that. So my friend Jeff was telling me one day that around his way they had a dude who used to slob all the time. Always had slob running out the side of his mouth.
Okay.
And so they used to call him Slavicus, right?
All right.
And so I thought that was funny. And so after having a couple conversations, I just the it didn't have anything to do with slop coming down your mouth, but I started to look at the situation that we were facing as far as hygiene. Me and another brother wrote this book. His name is Isef Uno. And so we decided it was time to make a book for children so that they could understand the importance of staying clean and germ free. This was right as COVID-19 was coming out and hitting the world and causing the world to flip itself over. So we felt, being a teacher of young children for many years, I knew children do not have the best hygiene in the world. They're still learning, right? It's nothing for a child to do things that we as adults consider to be pretty nasty, right? But as a teacher, you understand that they're children and you
Right.
teach them in school not to do these things. So I said, well, why don't we write a book about a character who has to learn the same lesson? And this lesson is not just for children. There are plenty of adults who could have better hygiene, plenty of adults who could have um, better ways and habits when they're in the public. And that could slow down some of the spread of disease because as we see, one thing comes and another thing comes and another thing comes. So Sloppy Joe is a kid who's from the neighborhood. He's a cool guy, but his only problem is that he's a sloppy guy and he's unorganized. And he borrows, things from his family and his friends and stuff, and then he loses them in his room. So without giving away the whole tale, his parents take responsibility. They're our first teachers. His parents take responsibility and tell him, look, you're going to have to change your life around, start getting a little cleaner, clean his room. By doing that, he ends up, finding things and all that, but it's also linked into music. He finds out the secret behind creating music through him cleaning up. And, I tell them more about that, but they got to go buy the book or listen to the audio in order to find out what's going on.
Well, you just said exactly the reason why you are on this podcast today. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask him to give you his social links and the connections to his accounts where you can get these books. The series that everything that D has written, every book has a hidden message in there. It either tells you how to be selfless instead of selfish. It'll either tell you how to maintain personal hygiene. It'll even maintain or tell you how to interact with other people that are different from you and have conversation. The education through the words are on a page are so powerful when he talks about the power of that. A lot of times a parent cannot get across to their son or daughter to clean their room when they're shouting at them to do their homework and to clean their room at the same time. I know personally from a parent, I've been in that situation, and we like any other war. I basically says, look, this is a territory we're going to keep clean as long as your bedroom door is shut, and I don't know, just shut the door and you'll live with it. As soon as you get tired of living that way, you'll change. And everything about life is chance and choice. And so, if you want to take a chance to experience something outside of your own circle, I would say go to D's website or go to Amazon and pick up his books. If you are a person that is looking for answers or solution or another conversation that comes uncomfortable to you and your child, I would say again, pick up his books or pick up any books. Do not hold on just because we're Black authors to saying that we have something that you don't want to hear, because we all have a message. That's the reason why we write. So D, how do they find you? What is your website and how do we get copies of your book?
Okay. If I could say this right, and I'll come right to that, because you made a point about parents.
Go ahead.
And that is when you first asked me my reasoning for writing the books, I didn't mention this, and this is probably the most important one, and that is having a positive self-image is at the beginning of having a strong person and having a strong member of society. So many times throughout our time here, we have been characterized and dehumanized in all of these, in the roles and the characters that we play. Either we're buffoons, or we're gangsters, or we're prostitutes. These different things. We don't like education. See, this is what the children are following. They're watching TV. So I took responsibility as an educator, as a person from the community who had kids myself. I felt like we need to make books that are catered for us, catered to us. My books are for everyone, right? You can read these books, and people say, well, if they're for everyone, then why not put everyone in them? Actually, I do. You know what I mean? But when I choose to do a book that only has Morris children, so-called Black children in it, or so-called characters, there's nothing wrong with that, because for many, many years we had to watch that and absorb that, and that had something to do with how we think today. So I'm like, okay, if I concentrate on myself, if I teaching children within my own community, that should teach all children. But there's nothing wrong with me focusing in on myself if I know that I have a problem. If my backyard is dirty and I go back to clean up my backyard, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have to clean your backyard too. Clean your own backyard. Feel me?
Yep.
So to get to me, like I said, you told them in the beginning, all they have to do is put in Sundiata the Tail Weaver, Sundiata the Tail Weaver on Amazon.com. On Google will pull up many different things, because like I said, I have 2 different companies that I'm rolling with. We also have Sundiata the Tail Weaver is spelled Sundi. I'll put it in the chat so that they can see that.
Well, they won't be able to see that because we're actually recording. So
that's right. That's right.
I will put that in the description.
The description, okay.
And we'll share that with everyone else. And you brought up something when you talk about traditional publishing. So the publishing market when I first got published is much different. When I wrote my first Christmas story, Sprinkles, the True Spirit of Christmas, a publisher that had published my book, Letters to Elvis, that was very excited about that. When they met me, the excitement changed because they weren't expecting a Black author to write a book called Letters to Elvis, but I wrote about his fans. When I submitted my book, Sprinkles, the True Spirit of Christmas, to them, and this is a big publishing house, I got a letter from their senior editor saying, love your story, but we don't think the world's ready for this kind of story. And I sat back and going, what kind of story? And you put it at the forefront of the conversation, is that when you look at Christmas, you do not see us as major characters or people of color, but our children celebrate Christmas, no matter what the meaning is to us based on religious belief or historical belief. We celebrate Christmas, and Sprinkles was all about being kind. It overcomes anti-bullying, sexism, and about just being kind and how we have to work together. And I apologize for everyone. I said there's nothing about Christmas in the book other than our children getting along. So each one of my books is layered with an education. It's the reason why I started out the way that I did. But I also want to go back to another part of you, because you are a master of everything. I mentioned in the top end of the show that you're a master storyteller. You have been in the music industry. You have been a film director and producer. I also shared a impromptu meeting with a group of your friends that the names of and images of people, I'm not going to share all the details, but when you talk about Street Pressure, you talk about Snoop Dogg, Puffy, Kendrick Lamar, which I'm going to tell you, as a Black man, I'm probably the most uncool person in the world, because while we were on that call, I was trying to figure out who in the hell Kendrick Lamar was, and I couldn't spell his name fast enough without you guys realizing that I was trying to be cool, because I knew who P. Diddy was, but I didn't know who the others. But Street Pressure is a socially conscious network that you and a group of friends are doing, and we're going to do a podcast, and I'm going to show up on you guys' podcast, and you guys are going to show up on mine, and that's coming attraction. So stay tuned. Tell us about Street Pressure, if you can talk about that now.
Well, I'll say this much. I'll say that Street Pressure definitely is something I'm working with. I was brought in by the CEO of Street Pressure, D Skills. And Mr. D Skills, he put that together a long time ago to give the opportunity for the community to express itself in all forms, all walks of life, not just progressive, not just positive or conscious, everything. Like he had a vision that, you know, all of the aspects of our life should be covered and everybody should be given a chance to express themselves. So we will have a presence on Street Pressure. I mentioned the name of the company that wrote Sloppy Joe, aka Sloppikins, is called Vortex Triller Thrillers. And that is a separate thing with me and Asef Uno. Vortex Tales is my company that pretty much all my stories come through. Vortex Tales Power Plant. They need to go check that out on YouTube. I came up with that. It's a station that has lots of stuff for children and education, and it was in reverence to the electric company, like we talked about earlier. Because you mentioned conjunction junction with your function. By the way, that was Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah.
And I got to give a big shout out to Schoolhouse Rock because I learned a lot of things on Schoolhouse Rock on Saturday mornings, watching cartoons, and in between them slipping in nice educational pieces of information that were entertaining. Same thing I'm trying to do today, you know, which is I don't have hold of the Saturday morning ears because everything's different. But I wanted to make a spot where children can come and see different things, skits, stories, music, all that kind of stuff, where they can learn and be entertained at the same time.
Well, I will tell you this, RMK Productions Network, we're doing a lot of things. We do have a format. If you create a Saturday commercial based on that type of education, I will provide you a platform in order to have that Saturday morning streamed across the global planet for all children, because it's not only Black children that struggle with formal education, it's all children that struggle. We have lost the gift of teachers that were passionate about teaching, other than teachers showing up for a job that are responsible for teaching. So if you're offended by what I said, then that means you're a problem. If you understood what I said, that means you're part of the solution. So I'm not taking it back. You know, and that's one of the things is we're real here. But also on top of that, you have a connection before we leave to hip hop and the way it originated. And I'm going to be doing a project with you that we're working on, that we're going to do music 7 for 7, and we're going to do a free concert. Give us a quick background of your relationship and the origin of what hip hop was, and you know, feel free to pop up names that you worked with and whatever, because you worked with some big names. Tell us.
I tell you like this, Kev. I am a musician. My Sundiata the Tail Weaver deals with music. And there's another guy named Squally Darks who goes with Sundiata the Tail Weaver, and he makes music. Another guy named Cochise the Beast makes a lot of that music too. It's hip hop based. Sundiata the Tail Weaver is a little different than the musical entity that resides inside of me, and they talk about different things. I would be wise, I think, maybe to keep them a little bit disconnected at this point, because the musical element, I deal a lot more political, a lot more street-based things that, you know, adults can deal with. The author in me looks out for the children, and unless I'm writing something for adults, then I put those kinds of labels on them.
All right.
So for the purpose of today, and I really appreciate the respect, but I kind of wanted to leave Sundiata in the spotlight. That other guy, you know, he'll get you in trouble.
All right, well, we don't want to get you in trouble. I always ask this of all my guests, and
Yes.
for my
Yes,
listeners, please, you know, I agree for anyone, no matter what your race is, the best secret that you want to keep is in the pages of a book. If you look at the binding of any book, it crosses over every racial barrier, every economic barrier, every, you know, class barrier, and whatever. You know, you turn the page and it's white. You look at the words, it's Black. It has a story to tell from beginning and end. There's a mission and a purpose, a reason why authors write books, is because we think that of the 8 billion people that are on this planet, that 1% that will read the book, that will make an impression, that will make them a better human being overcome experiences or traumas, and allow them to have a conversation that needs to be had. So, with that said, I have listeners that are dynamic people. And I say this 100% of the time. I have never looked for millions of followers. I look for people that have a higher call to action. The people that subscribe and listen to RMK Productions, where they don't pop on to find out what the next cool thing is. They don't drive by an accident. They stop to help. I've had 4 people working on number 5 that someone from my listening audience has granted someone their lifelong dream. So when I ask you, ASK, what is your ask? If you had one dream or one wish that someone listening to this podcast can make true, Brother D, what would that ask be? And again, ASK, what would your ask be? The show is yours.
Well, the ASK, I could think about a lot. I thought about it when you since before. I think that my major ask is smaller than a lot of the asks that I would say. Of course, money, being recognized and all that kind of stuff is cool. But I think at the base, let me just answer it this way. When I was teaching, I remember I taught this little girl one time, and about 10, 13 years later, I was at a Malcolm X festival in Atlanta, and this woman walked up who was this little girl that I taught. And she recognized me because I don't look that much different, but I didn't recognize her at first. And when she came up to me, she said, she called me Coach Cooper. That's what they would call me. Hey, I'm here. I was like, what are you doing here? She was like, I've been coming to the Malcolm X Festival for years because of that stuff you used to teach me in school. I started looking up some of the things that you were saying, and that's why I'm here today. The woman almost brought me to tears. That's my ask. My ask is that my efforts on the planet would push people to go in the direction that they need to be going in, to educate themselves, not just education, but to do something for your community. So my ask is that my seeds come, they grow. That's it. Everything else will come.
D, I'm going to tell you, man, we talk a lot. I love you. I am so happy that another beloved brother, and for our community, it's very strong for a Black man to tell another man that he loves him.
Yeah.
And I love you like a brother. Ray Porch, I love you like a brother.
Back, bro.
Thank you for making this introduction, my partner. And I want to thank my listeners and my loyal fans. I hope you enjoyed this episode of talking with Kevin and Son. And D is one of those people you should know. He is someone's story that you need to tell over and over again. Pick up his books, listen to his music. I will keep you posted on the next things to come. I also want to tell you the struggle is a never-ending process. No matter where you come from, no matter what the reflection of your skin or where you live and whatever, freedom is never really won. You earn it and you win it with every generation. And that's how we get things to change. I have a hashtag that find 1,000 reasons to be kind to someone. You can adapt it. The twos in it and spell is with the letter 2. My grandfather always said, when you get to a point that you can help someone else, it is your duty to do so. Reach one, teach one, and we'll fade to black and we're out. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you. Thank you.
Much love.
That's it.